This is Ben with Studio on the Lake. Welcome once again. This is a Happy New Year to you. This is the 2nd of January, and here's I'm sitting down in Iowa, and here's a second wand that I carved, and this one's along the lines of Dumbledore's or an Elder's wand from the Harry Potter group. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. And the first one had quite a bit of popularity, so I went ahead and did a second one. This time I took some Dutch elm, which is that dark brown. You notice the grain going every which direction on that. And I marked out 2 of them. You can see that it's kind of cold out in the studio. It was probably -6 that day, and I got started long before the stove caught up with me. But I marked out 2 wands, and I only did 1 of them out of that. So took it over the bandsaw and sawed it out. One of the things about this elm wood is the grain direction on it goes every which way, and it's interlocking. It's almost impossible to carve with a knife. You kind of have to use power carving on it, and you can see that I drew reference lines. I want this to end up relatively round, and I started with a larger piece because it's going to have little knurls or knobs on it like you saw there in the piece. So reference lines, working each of those down to the corners. I didn't know if on the finish on this, if I was going to leave it out. This stuff finishes beautifully. It looks a lot like walnut once you put if you sand it up and put a polish on it. But like I said, the grain goes every which direction. I've made several tables out of this. This is a tree that used to sit at West Point when I was stationed out in West Point in the early 2000s. I was driving up to work one day, and they had a 10 or 12 foot round section sticking in the back of a dump truck and probably 10 foot long. When I got to work, I called the folks that I knew. I was with the West Point Flight Detachment, a little small detachment of 4 warrant officers supporting West Point, and we knew the folks that worked out at the dump or the reclamation. I gave him a call, and he said, "Oh yeah, we took down one of the 2 trees, 300-year-old Dutch elm trees that stood over the point there at West Point on the proper campus. They were right next to the cannons and the flag, if you're familiar with West Point at all." And he said, "Would you like some of it?" And I said, "Absolutely." And at the time, we were out at Stewart Airport, which is about 20 miles away to the north. And he said, "Well, we'll load some up and bring it out to you." So they loaded up probably 12 or 15 logs in rollaway dumpsters and brought them out to the hangar. We had 2 hangars at the time, and I had my bandsaw there. So we went and ripped the boards up, and a partner took half of it, and I took the other half, and we let it dry. I've made some furniture out of this, and it turns out that when you make furniture out of it, it's unstable. So I've got some interesting tables with funny looking legs on them, with wooden rustic legs, but the tabletop changes 2 to 3 inches, and I kid you not, 2 to 3 inches between the winter and the summer. So it's not stable for furniture making. It moves a lot, and I've kind of relegated it to carving. So these are the knurls that I'm going to leave on the thing, and the round gives me an idea that that's where they need to stay. 2 things going on here. You can see I'm cutting this down with my DeWalt, and I could use a new sanding disc, but in addition to that, this stuff has a tendency to burn because of the tight grain on it, and that was a little foggy. And it wasn't from the dust that was coming from that DeWalt grinder. It was just that the camera lens had finally warmed up from the stove, and when they do that, they start to condense inside, and they fog over. So I swapped those out with another one. I really got to get in the habit now of bringing them back into the house. So the first one was a Kutzall that you saw, and this one is a saber tooth burr. And you can see it's a yellow, it's a medium, but it's working real nice on these. And the first thing I did was cut down the buttons or the knurls on this, and then everything between those gets taken down. So while I you watch me run this. A lot of this is run a lot of times, and I'll run the initial portion in real speed, and then the secondary portion I'll go ahead and run that 2.5 times. So there's the rough basic shape of that thing, and I'm real happy with the way it's doing. So now is the shaping of these different knurls and the little knob that goes on the end. Hey, if you get a chance, check out some of the other wood carvers that I follow down in the link section, and then I'd kind of like to start adding some stuff this year, and I'll do something on them. If you're really bored and you like to do research, there's a list of carvers that I started following long before this YouTube thing, probably 35 years ago, give or take, maybe 40. Grinling Gibbons, an English carver, and I'll put these names down in the section there. You can look them up. He was an English carver. He worked in, as did most of these other folks, in linden, basswood, or lime, L-I-M-E. You've heard me talk about wood before, but they did that, and some of them worked in oak. But these are the carvers that I followed. Grinling Gibbons, 1648 to 1721. He did leaf carvings and stairwells with small violins and vines and really small detail work, and I was really surprised that any of it's still standing today. And then you move over into Germany, and several of the churches and the big carvings in the churches were done by a gentleman named Tilman Riemenschnieder. Or Riemenschnieder, there's a mouthful. But his stuff is awesome, and they are primarily religious figures, but you'd just be amazed at some of the stuff he's done. I'm going to do a couple of small carousel animals this year, and that was another group that I followed. Charles Looff was a carver of carousel animals, and then my favorite, Gustaff Dentzel. But more than Gustaff Dentzel, there's two characters that worked for him. One was Dentzel Muller, who eventually started his own company, but these are great carvers. And then another one, Salavador Cernigliaro, and he's my favorite. If you look at the whimsical carousel figures, the rabbits, the giraffes, the funny-looking frog, that sort of stuff, if you've looked at any carousels, he's the guy that did those in the 20s when all this stuff was going on. And I had heard a story, and I have to find it. I'll see if I can find it and read it to you. But a lot of these carvers came from Italy and Germany, and they were immigrants in the 20s, and when they were looking for work, they would go down to these carousel companies and try to talk to the owner. Well, one character went down. He was Italian, and the owner was German, and the owner didn't speak English. He didn't speak German or English, and he didn't have an interpreter, so he walked down to the guy's studio or shop where they were carving carousel animals and talked to him, and as best they could with sign language and whatnot. And the character, owner of the shop, being a German, if you've ever listened to any German, it sounds a little like someone's yelling at you, like they might be angry, and they did sign language and gestures back and forth for 10 or 15 minutes, and then the German turned around and went back into his shop and slammed the door. Well, the Italian character walked off and went back to his apartment or whatever, and told his wife and kids that didn't work out. And so a week went by, and he was trying to figure out what he needed, how he was going to get a job, and this character, German, showed up at his door with an interpreter this time that was capable of interpreting, and basically what he said was, "Where the hell are you at? I hired you a week ago, and you haven't shown up." And the interpreter explained it to him that he didn't know he was hired. These two guys went on to work together for another 30 or 40 years. So just an interesting story, and I'll find the actual story and the names involved at some point here in this new year. So here's the but once again, if you want to look at those guys, I'm going to do a little bit on each of them as we go through kind of a historical series. It'll take a lot more effort than I was putting in on today. I just wanted to give you a heads up that I'm going to do some of those videos. But here's the rough out on that wand. And this is what they would have called in the Potter series an elder wand. And I'm going to take a little bit of license with it, not a whole lot, but a little bit as we go along. So here's my second favorite burr. This is a ruby flame bit, and I'm putting flutes in the top of this. And you can see that ruby cuts actually pretty well. And I think the reason that I like these ruby bits is the point. Once you get the point dug in, you can go ahead and manipulate the rest of that bit around to follow where you want it to go. It's not trying to slide out of that. You can get a groove or a line going pretty well. For those of you that are new to the channel, the handpiece is from PJL Enterprises over next door to me here in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. At least he was last time I saw. And this is my old handpiece, probably 25 years old. So I'm gonna cut the flutes in the top of this thing, and then I will come back later on and burn them and refine them a little bit. So the weather here in Wisconsin has finally turned to winter. And we've gotten down to that point where it's freezing outside. And it's really freezing outside. It's like -7, -10. Now we will get down to 15 or 20 degrees below zero, but usually only for a couple of weeks. And I've been running down to Iowa, and Iowa's not nearly as cold, 6 hours to the south, but the wind down here blows a lot, and that changes and makes the wind chill come up. So I've switched this over, and this is one of those terrible Chinese burrs. This is a diamond burr that's round, and I kind of wanted exactly what it's doing, so it worked out good for me because it actually did what I wanted it to do. I wanted little spears or divots in there, and I kind of wanted the bottom of them burnt or burnished. And this thing is, as you can see, it's doing it all by itself without a whole lot of effort from myself. And I'm pressing on it pretty hard and letting it burn. So now we're coming down to the burls. I didn't want initially I started out kind of with a straight deal, and then I decided I really wasn't liking the straightness to it, because this burl is wider in the center than it is on either end, and eventually you see I'm starting to kind of random the pattern out here. It dawned on me after I had done a few that I really didn't want straight lines going down. I wanted kind of a Swiss cheese random burl look, and I did manage to achieve that with the other 2 or 3 burls that are lower on this thing. Part of that burning is not necessarily 100% in the diamond, although as you've heard me say before, I prefer the ruby over the diamond, and I prefer the sapphire over the diamond. So this is the handle portion, and you can see here that I finally caught on that I wanted to go a little more random with this, and so I intentionally tried to stay away from putting a straight line in there. And again, I wanted a cheese look, kind of a holy, burly looking thing, and I was real pleased again with how this came out. One of the fun things, I was surprised at how popular that initial wand came out. I think what's happening is it's not just you knuckleheads that follow me a little bit and watch what I do. I think the magical wand, making a magical wand out of wood or whatever the heck I named it, that's popping up in searches, and it's getting a whole new group of people, and hopefully they'll go ahead and subscribe and follow along. So here I'm working my way down. I've got the handle portion that I wanted up at the top, and I've got another plan for the portion of the wand in between those other than the handle. So that one I did a real nice job of getting random parts into the, for lack of better reference, the little burl portion on that. I should have taken this on hindsight. I should have finished it, really sanded the snot out of this thing and made it really smooth and gotten a shiny finish on everything, but I didn't. I kind of left it a little bit rustic. I finish it later on, as you'll see, with a little bit of shellac and then some beeswax, and it'll age real nicely. I am going to do some birds and decoys specifically. I'm going to do a full-sized hawk. I think this year, if I get my motivation, I've got a 1/4 sized eagle that I did. It's a fourth the size of a full eagle with a 6-7 foot wingspan. But I think I'm going to go ahead and laminate up the wood this year and actually do a full-size eagle soaring over your head, so his wings will be fully out and his tail will be out and his feet will be tucked. So you can look forward to that, and I suspect that's going to be a 6 to 8 video series. When I get to doing that, I'm going to do some pretty big projects this year, and then I'm going to do some of my standard decoys that I've done and sold over the years, and then I'm going to do some songbird series. If you haven't subscribed, do so and go back and look. You'll find I do a lot of hummingbirds and sell them. And if I get around to it, I'll get some of them sold or built this year. I think I'll refilm that again, because that's one of the more popular videos. I think, and I think I'm getting better at putting these videos together over the last 18 months. So it might not hurt to go back and revisit some of those subjects of the earlier videos, just because my production technique, I think, has improved a little bit. I don't think my carving has changed. I don't think my carving's changed for years. So I've switched to a stone, and what I really wanted was the bottom of those flutes going down on those to show a highlight and a burn. I'm going to come back a little bit later with those and use a wood burning pen on it just to bring the highlights out on it. But you'll notice that I was trying intentionally not to make these straight. I kind of wanted them to be random. And lo and behold, they did turn out random. So here you go. I got down to the thinner part at the bottom of the wand, and I thought, well, this is the place to switch to the burner. And once again, I'm not trying to make these straight. And I will come back with the ruby bit, the flame bit, and use the bottom of this burn as a little bit of a guide and rough these in a little bit more. I gotta admit, the two wands, this one and the earlier one, if you haven't seen that, you might want to check that out. The dragon wand that went away at Christmas time because it was a gift for one of the dwarfs. This one's not spoken for, and we'll see what happens with it. But I do intend to do a bunch more wands, and I'll throw them up on Etsy. I think I've got an idea of putting put a feather in some resin and incorporating that into a wand with I don't know, maybe even brass ferrules or something, but we'll see how that comes out in the future here. So there you go. It's starting to look like a wand. This bottom part down here, I decided I didn't want it to go straight right about there, and I decided to go ahead and spin it around, and the bottom part has a twist on it. If I said that these are fun to make, and the reason they're fun to make is they're mindless, and there's the basic design of a wand, of course. Heck, a broomstick would be a wand if you're a kid, or a stick laying out in the yard. But these, you can kind of go, let them develop as you're going along. Start out with a general concept and then go. When I did a little research on some wands, and they start to get crazy. They're kind of like spoons if you're carving spoons, and I will carve a couple more spoons in some series this year. And you can start going crazy on the design. And that's kind of the fun of this carving. If I wasn't filming this, I would probably take a little bit more time to do them, but I'd kind of come up with the same thing. And I might do a couple series, I think. I'll call it freestyle, where I just take a piece of wood and start working and see what happens. So that's coming along pretty nice. I'm going to come back and off camera and do put some more depth. I'm going to burn into the bottom. You can see I did it. I burned into the bottom a lot of those holes or round divots in that, because I kind of wanted it to have a sponge look. And now I'm coming back on those flutes with that ruby bit and making it a little bit more knurly or gnarly. I don't know which one you would go with. But my intention was not to do 2 wands, but again, I was really surprised by the popularity of the wands. And as always, leave me a comment down below and tell me if I'm on the right track. A lot of people have said they'd like to see the birds. The birds, for some reason, take a long time. Well, not for some reason. They have a lot of detail in them. They'll have 4, 5, 10, 20 hours worth of wood burning in them, in addition to coming back with the stones, because I do each individual feather with a realistic. But they weren't getting quite the viewership. I just made the assumption that people didn't want to see those. So I was kind of surprised. A couple of videos ago, I asked you folks to, especially those of you that are always, I always see the same names, plus some new names in the comments. And that tells me that those are the folks that are actually following what I'm doing, and I want to do stuff that they're interested in. And then we'll pick up new folks along the way. And one of the things they said was they really wanted to see the birds, and I'm kind of pleased with that, because of all the carvings that I enjoy doing, the birds are where I started. And then I did some carousel animals, and you'll get to see some of those this year. And then I got off into the wizards because people liked them and that sort of thing. And this guy, I like I said, I was tempted to sand it so this stuff would really show through, and it would look a lot like black walnut. But then I gave up and decided just to finish it off. So this is getting a coat of amber shellac, and I'm going to rub most of that off. I'm just going to let it get a little bit of a highlight on there, and then I'll come back and you can see it there. And I haven't quite finished rubbing it off, but I did a coat of wax on it. And this is the next day, because you can see that it's cold again in the studio. But I'll buff this up and it'll be a little bit more shiny. But there it is. That's magic wand number 2. So as always, it's been Ben with Studio on the Lake. So hey, leave me comments, give a like if you like it, and subscribe, and do share. Hey, thanks a lot, and Happy New Year to everyone.